Okay, just doing a little bit of sharing some ideas on a Bible verse that has been meaningful to me for as long as I can remember. I remember as I think a teenager, my parents gave me a living Bible, which is it's not from a scholarly point of view, is not a real accurate translation, but what they attempted to do is write the Bible in plain English. And they missed a lot, but they also picked up a lot by doing that. But I remember reading this particular scripture, or this verse, that saying of Jesus, about being anxious over your life, and to just consider the natural world, consider the lilies of the field. How they don't toil or spin, spinning meaning they don't make their own clothing, they don't spin their yarn, they don't work for a living like we think of it normally, and yet there's a support for them that is important to observe and to acknowledge as also involved in us. And I have talked about this idea from a little bit different perspective, and to show all of us that we have this going on in us all the time. And all you have to do is think about what caused you to rise up from your traditional background. How many of you had a traditional religious upbringing? Almost all of you. How many of you were actually raised in unity? Just a few. So most of us came from a background that was given to us as authority, and to challenge that authority, you would go to the authority to ask your questions, and that authority would give you the answer. I did this on a number of occasions in the Baptist church when I became interested in actually attending church, and I had a lot of questions for my minister. But what you observe in yourself, those of us that have come from that level of authority, that type of authority, some of you probably Catholic, some Protestant, all kinds of things. Maybe some of you had a cult background, I don't know. Many accuse unity of being a cult, which is so far from the truth. Actually, fundamental Christianity is closer to a cult than unity ever was, because it worships the personality of Jesus. And that's, I'm not picking a fight with fundamental Christianity by any means, but we process this kind of thing. We look at the teachings that we are given, probably from birth, and something in us challenges that. There's something in us that says, this doesn't quite ring true somehow. I don't know what it is, I don't know how to explain it, but there is something that doesn't quite sit right about it. And maybe it's just logic. It's not logical. It doesn't seem logical at all, from certain points of view. Or we wonder what benefit, what value is something in us begins to question it. So what is that? Why would that happen? And the answer, I think, is that when Jesus was saying, consider the lilies of the field, he was really referring to that natural inclination that all of us have to know truth, to know freedom. There's an inbuilt, intuitive knowing that we're connected to something very grand, and that we know that. We have that sense, and probably the things that draw us to religion, even if you grow up in it, the things that appeal to you. Just like when I was in the Baptist church and I read this line, it was like there was something I responded to in that. It was like God takes care of us. There's a mothering side to God, a compassionate side. I was pretty much taught that, there was a loving side. God is love, otherwise he wouldn't have sent his only son to die for us all and give us the opportunity to be saved. But there's a love, there's a compassion, Jesus was pointing to something different than that. It was a natural caring, like I'm a projection of something that is supporting me. A very different thing than thinking that God performed some act because he loved me. It's like whatever God is there with me. It's flowing through the flower. And because the flower never got out of tune with it, the flower knows how to stay in that zone and is supplied. And that flower doesn't try to be something other than it is. It's, the dandelion doesn't envy the rose. From a human perspective, we put a lot more value on the rose than the dandelion. If you don't believe me, go buy a dozen. Which I did not too long ago. Gave them to my wife. And that had more meaning to her, I'm sure, than if I gave her a dozen dandelions. I might try that sometime, I don't know, but she loves flowers. But that is a human thing. It's not a flower thing. Dandelions don't look over at roses and say, gosh, maybe in 3 more lifetimes I'll be one of those. And the rose doesn't, I'm sure, look down on the dandelion. There's no competition. It's just, I am what I am. So I think he was referring to that kind of thought, and it's not even a thought, that type of intuition. We are here to be what we are and who we are, and as long as we're doing that, we're supplied. But when we try to become something else, if the dandelion started envying the rose and tried to become like the rose, would it be supplied? If it started saying, my prosperity is everything that makes me closer to being a rose, it would struggle all of its life. It wouldn't experience prosperity because it's not being true to itself. Of course, I'm being facetious because flowers don't do that. But people do. And we all probably have done that. And maybe we're doing it now. Maybe if it feels like we're incomplete, our life is not full, that there's something missing, it's because we're a dandelion trying to become a rose, or a rose trying to become a dandelion. We're trying to be something other than what we are at the deepest level. So there's a lot to what Jesus is talking about here. It's bringing ourselves into a level of understanding of ourselves, that thing that caused us to rise up out of whatever authority we came from, to say maybe that's not true, maybe there's something more. Because in a sense, what I get from the whole religious thing is it's saying, you're a dandelion and that's not good enough. That you want to be something more. You were born in the sin of being a dandelion. And you can be so much more. That what you are right now is not good enough. And so we kind of are raised with that idea. And I think that's why we hear messages of God is within you, God is love. Every one of us is a center expressing all that there is in God if we wish, if we learn how to do that, if we learn how to let go. That is freedom, because we can stop being something we're not. And so we like that, we respond to that. That's, I think, why we love the teaching of the now moment, where there's no past and no future. We respond to that. But that self-image that we have created, it can't handle that. It doesn't like the now moment, never is in it. It's always looking for some other place, some other moment, some future past. But Jesus is saying that thing that makes the flower work, succeed, successful, prosperous, is active in us. So we say, that's great. I love that. I love to hear that. But what he's also saying is you've got some work to do. You've got some letting go to do. You've got some rethinking to do. So you take all of your religious authority and you basically let it go. And Jesus said he didn't come to break the law, he came to fulfill it. And that's really what this is all about. It's to fulfill the law is to be true to yourself. You are the law in expression. I am the law in expression, not the self-image we've created, not this personality, this mask that we're wearing. That's not the image and likeness of God. And that's what most of us are trying to keep afloat. We're trying to keep that above water. And so we're praying from a dandelion perspective for something that will make me a rose. And that's how we define prosperity. We define prosperity by something that makes us more than what we are now. But the truth is, prosperity is becoming what you are, accepting in consciousness, finding your center of power and being that. It's not adding anything to your life, it's letting go or uncovering what is already there. That's prosperity. It's not about accumulation. Accumulation almost always has to do with the dandelion trying to become the rose. It has to have something other than what it has now. But true prosperity, true healing, divine order, it all begins with the understanding of who and what we are, that I'm enough. I am complete now. Consider the lilies. They're not struggling in the same way that I am. And why not? Because they are already happy with what they are. And because of that, they're in perfect tune with their environment. They know what to draw from the soil, from the sun, from the rain. They know how to pull in an outer way, everything that makes them what they are. They're not the dandelion trying to become the rose. So when you find yourself in a struggle of that sort, this teaching is very profound. It's very freeing to come back and just say, I'm enough. I am created in the image and likeness of God right now. So the saying is, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all of his glory was not clothed like one of these. Solomon had a lot of problems. Lilies of the field don't. So is prosperity being as wealthy as Solomon, having all of the stuff that Solomon had, and living a life toiling and spinning. We toil and spin because we're trying to be something we're not. And that's something that each one of us have to look at and have to define, have to understand. But I can tell you that whatever caused you to rise up out of your authoritarian religious matrix, your belief system, and start asking questions, that's what Jesus is talking about. That very thing. It's a living, organic thing in all of us. And you can find something like unity, and that will satisfy that for quite a while. But it doesn't go away. You will keep asking questions. You'll keep searching. You will keep moving into a deeper understanding of yourself, your dandelion self, or your rose self, whichever you are, to say, I'm enough, till you get to that point where you know you're complete, as you are. And then prosperity, that's what it's all about. It's getting to that point. It's a shift in perception. It's not an accumulation of things, because the lilies of the field don't need any more. They are supplied because they're being true to themselves. It's a pretty interesting, simple idea. But see, when you found yourself not at rest with your traditional values, your traditional belief system, you were also supplied. I was unhappy, I guess, with the answers I was getting to the questions I had. And I discovered the book Lessons in Truth in a public library, totally unexpected. So like the lily of the field, something was presented to me. It was an outer thing, but it was in perfect harmony with what was going on inside. So my lily, myself as a lily, myself as a dandelion, was supplied with exactly what I needed. It was a game changer. It was something that confirmed a stirring that I knew was very real, but I didn't understand it. And I couldn't explain it for a long time. I still have a hard time explaining it. I've been trying to explain it for 40 years. In fact, I can't explain it. I can just experience it. But you know what I'm talking about because you were touched by the same thing. What is that? It's like we're going along in life. We're in a parameter of ideas, set of ideas. But there's something larger than those ideas. And we're not sure what that is. It's us, it's the soul, but we don't know how to get in touch with it. We don't know how to make it practical. And that's when we go into all the reading and all the study that we do. It's a good thing to do. But the reading and the study it's the dandelion getting permission to be itself. Have you noticed that the more books you read, the more you think you've read it all? You know, I mean, how many truth ideas are there? There's probably a dozen. The kingdom of God is within you. That's the first one probably most of us responded to somehow in some form. That God is within me. So why did I respond to that? Because the system of thought that I had is God is out there someplace. And I've got to do something to reconnect, to get with God. I've got to join this club and walk the straight and narrow, do all the things that I'm supposed to do so I can reconnect with God. But then I'm told I'm already one with God and God is within me. So that's a whole different set of ideas. And the fact that I respond to that, and you can tell some people that, and they won't respond to it because they're not ready for it. They haven't reached a point yet where they can give up the possibility of, I'm not going to be a rose. I don't need to be. I've got to be a rose. So they can't even hear any message that says, you're a dandelion, and that's great. Or you're a rose, and that's great. Can't even hear it. I've shared books with people, and they didn't get what I hoped they would get. And I gave up being disappointed about that very early because it just doesn't work. We have to find it ourselves. And the reason that's true is because it is ourself that's doing the speaking. It's ourself that's doing the prodding. It's ourself that's saying where you are now in terms of your understanding is not enough. There's more to you. And so we will respond to ideas that people share with us along this line, but it's almost like we're the ones that have to find them. We have to find that book that speaks to us. And then let that book speak to us until we've heard it all and move on. The book is the training wheels. It's a temporary instructor. And I've said before, you respond. Look at all your books that you love and look at all your highlights. All your highlights represent the gospel according to you. We highlight the things we know are true at the deepest level. That lily of the field, that part that is in perfect sync with the cosmic side of life. Before they call, I will answer. That's exactly what that means. Before we even called, that which we were looking for was present already. And everything that we read, everything we hear, that we respond to in that regard is pointing us to this very place. We already know where we want to go. But there is a period that we go through where we need convincing because of the authority that we carry on our shoulder. We're listening to other voices. And when voices of authority speak and say that the road we're on is not correct, we wonder, is it? But the time comes when we don't have to wonder, we know. And I think most of us know right from the get-go because that's why we rise up out of this. What a lot of people do for a long time is they don't really look for a reason for that deeper longing, that deeper sense that there's more. They spend the rest of their life fighting the tradition they came out of. There's a lot of people in Unity that are doing that, fighting the tradition they came out of. We don't want to do that. Do it as long as you need to, I guess. But why fight it when it's not even true? Why not just accept that this prompting that you're experiencing that's the truth. That's what you're looking for. That's the voice of God speaking through you. It's just a thing where we don't trust ourselves because we've been told this is the authority, that's the authority, not us. But if the kingdom of God is within, where else can we turn? Where else could we go for authority? I've given the illustration of walking into a room and seeing, 10 tables of people that tell you how to live your life. All kinds of disciplines and so forth, good things, positive thinking and spiritual teachings of all kinds. And then you have a table with God sitting there saying, come over here and I'll help you out. Which table would you go to? So that table's within us. But you notice we go to a lot of places before we go to that table. And I'm not saying this as a criticism, it's just we're born into a culture that teaches us we're not enough and the rest of us is out there someplace. We're not the lilies of the field. We're something else. And we must become something better. So we're born into that, and it's no wonder we do it. We try to make ourselves something other than we are. But the Greeks had it down above their temple doors. It says, know thyself. And that's really, there's so much truth to those two words. It's just unbelievable that it's that simple. So how do you know yourself? You ask, what made me rise up and do this? What caused me to get on this path? And we look at that and we make friends with it. It's a voice that's never stopped talking. You think you've never heard the voice of God? Well, you wouldn't be here if you hadn't. You wouldn't be out of your traditional background if you hadn't. We've all heard the voice of God. Does it sound like thunder? No. It's quiet. It's a quiet prompting. And it's a voice that when we hear truth spoken, when we hear it, when we read it, we respond to it. Something in our soul leaps. It responds. It's real. And nobody has to convince us that it's real. So all of our highlights in our books, that's the gospel according to you. You wouldn't have highlighted it if you didn't already know it was true. It's a very encouraging thing to me. I thought about this for a long time, that nobody led me to this place. I listened to myself. And I have felt lost many times, felt separated many times. But if I roll back and think about how would I do things differently, the reason I wander into a wilderness is because I'm trying to be true to myself. And I usually go off into some place that my other self is not familiar with. When I went through the whole thing with the unity movement and decided to pull my membership from that on a national basis, every decision I made was based on not what I was supposed to have accepted as true, but what was prompting me to be true. So truth will lead us sometimes down a lonely path. Does that mean we're failing? Does that mean we're not doing something right? Probably means just the opposite. Jesus was probably on one of the loneliest paths on this planet. He was probably surrounded by people all the time, but he was in a place that not many people were. How can you explain that place? How can you relate to other people who are constantly struggling with, what's this guy talking about? I like what I hear, but I don't understand him. But whatever he's saying, it's causing something in me to respond in a way that's never happened before. He asked several of his disciples one time when a bunch of them left, when he was talking about eating his flesh and all that and grossed them all out. And he turned to the ones that were still there and said, will you also take off? And I'm paraphrasing, of course. This was not the Living Bible. They said, where would we go? So you ask yourself that question, whatever caused you to rise up from your traditional teaching, will you too abandon that? Can you? I can't. I can't abandon it even when it seems to lead me in a place I don't understand. Once you touch that deeper level of yourself at any level, once you listen to that, you'll follow it. And we're following it now. And this is what we must do. This is our selves being the lily in the field. So what I'm talking about here is something we're already doing. Let's acknowledge it. You don't have to learn anything new. The lily does not have to learn how to be a lily. It doesn't go to lily school. It doesn't read books about think and grow like a lily. It just follows its own inner promptings. Great spiritual teachers of all ages have recognized God as an all-sustaining, all-providing source of support and guidance. Not out there someplace, but here. That thing that is prompting us. And I love this from Deuteronomy. You're all probably familiar with this. Isn't there a hymn or something around this? Everlasting arms. The eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. I've always responded to that in a way that is hard to explain. The eternal God is your dwelling place. We dwell in God. In God we live and move and have our being. It's not somewhere out there someplace. And underneath are the everlasting, underneath what? Underneath this surface thought, this surface personality. That's where the lily's supplied. That's where the lily's prompted. The everlasting arms. Everlasting means it's always there, never gone. Some of the one-liners that we find in the Bible, those that want to throw the Bible out because it seems too complicated, just go through it and highlight things and just keep the highlights. This is one of the ones I highlighted. The eternal God is your dwelling place. And underneath are the everlasting arms. That is such a powerful affirmation that if you're in trouble of some kind right now, just think about that. The eternal God is your dwelling place. That means everything you could ever want is here. This is your dwelling place. And I'm saying, well, my life is not enough. So God doesn't see it that way. Let's let that prompting show us how to see ourselves. And there's something supporting me, these everlasting arms. There's something supporting me now. Maybe I've strayed away from my center, so come on back home. Prodigal son, get back home. When we feel alone, cut off from any source of support or supply, it's because we're focused completely on the outer aspects of life, and we start thinking that our good comes only from external channels. And it certainly seems that way, but it's always important to think that God is my source, but there are many channels. Because when one channel dries up, when one door closes, a window opens, is the saying in The Sound of Music. It's very true. There's one source. God is my source, but there are many channels. So yes, sometimes it's disturbing when one of those channels is messed up, stops, it disappears. That happens in churches all the time. You get real good supporters and they'll move off, or they'll die, or they'll get angry or whatever, and they leave. So I'm always brought back to this idea that God is our source. God is our support. It doesn't always look like it. But it comes through other channels. And that's important to make that distinction. The channel may leave, but God never does. So another channel manifests, another way for that support to show. The belief that our good comes to us from the outside, from the outside in, has us looking everywhere for what first must be discovered within our own being. And that's why I would say, come back when you're feeling that way. Come back to that place. What caused me to step upon this path? You can see that was an inner thing. Something nudged me. Something said, this system of ideas that I was given, it's not big enough. It's not good enough. It doesn't address who I am at the deepest level. So that thing is still there. That prompting is still there. You know, never think, I've been on this path for 20, 40, 60, 80 years. You've only been on this path one moment, and that's now. And that thing that brought you here knows how to carry you forward. The thing that grows that lily knows how to grow the next lily, knows how to grow everything around it. If you're faced with a need right now, begin affirming something like this. God is my dwelling place, my perfect support. Today I draw to myself all that I need to live a full and prosperous life. Let's say that together. God is my dwelling place, my perfect support. Today I draw to myself all that I need to live a full and prosperous life. And that's echoes the Deuteronomy thing. But that's the truth, that when you get upset about something, consider the lilies. Consider that thing that brought you here, that caused you to rise up out of your life as it was. God as your source is now drawing to you everything you need to live a full and satisfying life. Just as the lily is clothed from the inside out, so are you. Take time often to remember this and to know that God is your everlasting source of absolute good. And Denise, that's my last slide. I don't have the little thing that pops up, so just to let you know. Okay, so next week we will start our Advent series. That's the first part of December, so we've got 4 Advent lessons that will lead up to our Christmas time. It's hard to believe we're there, but we are. All right. Thank you for coming out. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.